and my work focuses on how do we make an impact in the education system. And I also oversee our work around insights and self-assessments and how we collaborate across our sectors. I'm joined by my colleague Ben, who's going to be doing a bit of a demo for us later on as well.
Oh,
In terms of the agenda for this afternoon's webinar, we're going to introduce the YEF. I can see from the names in the chat that some of you are already very familiar with us, and for others, it may be your first interaction with us. So welcome to this really important work. We're going to talk through the experience of children and young people and start with some statistics that will give us some helpful context about the experiences of children and young people across England and Wales. We're going to touch briefly on our education practice guidance, which some of you may have already read through or had a look at previously. And then the focus of our webinar today is, of course, how do we self-assess? And focusing in on the EPIC tool, which is the Education Practice Insight Creator. Largely, we're going to be talking about how leaders of education settings, so schools, colleges, and alternative provisions, how they can self-assess using this tool. But I'm very conscious that some of you are joining and you're perhaps not an education leader or leader of a setting at the moment, or maybe your role is something slightly different to that, but you're still interested in this topic. And we're still hoping that you'll find it a useful session and very much would encourage you off the back of today's webinar to share it with those that you know, whether that's friends, family, professional colleagues, neighbours, who knows, share it with those around you. And hopefully they can also benefit from this self-assessment process, which is a free resource available to all education settings in England and Wales. So, as I mentioned, brief introduction to the Youth Endowment Fund. Our vision is a world where no child becomes involved in violence, and that's a really ambitious and challenging vision to focus on. And our part in that is to find what works and build a movement to put this knowledge into practice. We've got what I would say is a really simple and complex strategy. So this is our one slide strategy. And we focus on funding good work, finding what works, and then working for change. And we work across 7 different sectors, education being a fundamental, important part of all of that. And how this webinar fits into the bigger picture is that we're going to be talking about practice and our guidance for education leaders. And then we're going to be moving into, so how can we actually make a difference collectively off the back of that? So, to set the scene, we survey a large group of teenagers every single year. We also do a large survey of teachers and education leaders, and I'm going to be sharing some of those statistics a bit later on as well. So, at the end of last year, we surveyed 10,000 teenage children aged between 13 and 17, and we asked them questions about their safety, about violence, and about their vulnerabilities. And some of the statistics are really helpful in providing us with a mandate of what we should focus on and what we should work to see change within our society. 20% of the young people that we surveyed said that they had been a victim of violence in the preceding 12 months prior to being asked that question. That's a staggering amount of young people. So, 1 in 5, you think about a class or a year group, 1 in 5 of those potentially had, on average, been impacted by violence and been a victim to violence. A larger number had actually been concerned about becoming a victim of violence. That may be because of what they've seen or experienced online or offline, what they've heard about through their friends and other members of the community. But that's a large proportion of young people who are concerned about being a victim of violence. And I think just those 2 statistics alone is probably enough for us to say, right, let's try and make change. But we know that violence and the fear of violence also impacts education. So, of the young people that we surveyed, 10% of them reported skipping school, so changing their behaviour to because of the fear of violence. And we know that for a number of reasons, attendance hasn't recovered since pre-pandemic figures. And this is definitely a contributing factor when we think about the impact of violence on children and young people. But not all young people are victims of violence. And we work really closely with our youth advisory board and groups of young people who are passionate about making a change. And here's just one of the comments from a young person that we work with and how they're committed to seeing change within their education sector. So we know that young people are impacted by violence. But we also know that education is a really fundamental sector, and education is uniquely placed to keep children safe and provide them with positive support, positive opportunities, and ways in which to protect them from violence and from harm. Education settings play a crucial role in safeguarding and signposting to specialist help. But what we found from our work with the sector is that there's a bit of a gap in understanding and a gap in knowledge. And it's not surprising really, as a former school leader myself. You train to be a teacher, you work in leadership roles, but perhaps the issue around violence can sometimes feel like it's adjacent to the work. It might happen off-site or off campus oftentimes. And it's hard for sometimes for school leaders and education practitioners to understand what role they can play and how they can make a difference. And something that we're really focusing in on at the Youth Endowment Fund is understanding of evidence. So we surveyed head teachers, and just over half of them reported that they were not confident or not confident at all with identifying and delivering evidence-based interventions for preventing children's involvement in violence. That point around evidence-based interventions is really important. So with finite resources, with limited time and capacity, we want to be doing the things that are most likely to have a positive impact. At the Youth Endowment Fund, we talk about best bets. What are the things that are most likely to have a positive impact? And at the moment, as it stands, just over half of head teachers don't feel confident with being able to identify those things. So clearly, at the Youth Endowment Fund, we've got lots of work to do. Similarly, we spoke to teachers and DSL, so designated safeguarding leads, and again, a staggeringly high proportion of those reported that they hadn't received any specific training around serious violence in the preceding 2 years. So when we think about DSLs, these are the specific staff with that mandate and that responsibility for safeguarding, and oftentimes do that exceptionally well. But there is, even within those roles, not necessarily always a specific focus on violence, serious violence, how to identify children at risk of violence, and how to implement evidence-informed interventions. So with that backdrop, we developed the education practice guidance, which we published in May of 2024. And since then, we've been working extensively with the sector to support them to understand the guidance, to understand what our recommendations are, and importantly, where to start with it all. And I remember when I was a school leader, I didn't necessarily have the time to think about these issues that deeply because you're so focused in on the here and now and working with young people and families to help and support them. At the Youth Endowment Fund, we have the luxury of being able to focus on this as our sole mission. And there are a range of things that are fed into this education practice guidance, which is the most comprehensive and most up-to-date source of information around what works for preventing children's involvement in violence with a specific focus on the education sector. So it draws on our toolkit, it draws on independent reviews of practice and policy, interventions that we have funded and evaluated, and then there's large surveys of teenagers and teachers as well as working really closely with the sector and academics to ensure both the academic rigor and suitability for real life implementation. The guidance has got 5 recommendations, and as I mentioned earlier, some of you may be familiar with them already. There are 5 relatively straightforward recommendations, but within each one of them, there's quite a lot of nuance and detail. So the 5 things that we recommend are to keep children and young people in education, to provide them with trusted adults, to develop their social and emotional skills, to target the times and places where violence occurs, and to cautiously consider unproven strategies and avoid harmful approaches. So I'm sure all of you will agree with me that the importance of keeping children in education, and that specifically focuses on attendance, behaviour, and suspensions and exclusions. Recommendation 5 focuses on some things where we just don't know enough about them yet. So we wouldn't suggest and we wouldn't recommend focusing on them, spending time, energy, and financial resources on them because they're not best bets. So recommendations 1 to 4 are the areas to focus on. And there are actually some things that we know to be harmful, and they're covered in our education practice guidance as well. So we've got some great guidance, but we know the reality for education leaders and that there are so many demands on time and attention. So guidance is produced by organisations like us, and recommendations are made often for schools to do more and leaders to do differently. But that's a real challenge because often, as a leader, you don't have the time to reflect, to read through these things, to plan what actions might be suitable for your context and for your young people. And that means we've got this gap between great guidance and education leaders who perhaps really are going to need and benefit from that support. And we've also found that this problem and this gap is more acutely felt by serving underserved communities, where the need for evidence is greatest, but the time and resources are most limited. So we focused on how do we bridge this gap between great guidance and education leaders. And from there, that's where the Education Practice Insight Creator was born. And that's what we're going to talk you through in a little bit of a few moments. We piloted the Epic tool at the back end of last year. We worked with two large multi-academy trusts, and we covered 31 academies, and we learned about how can we refine the process, how can we better get it ready for the sector at large. I'm really excited to be able to share with you the latest tool that we've got that's providing some great insight to leaders across England and Wales. From our pilot, we found that the process supported reflection. We also found that it improved the knowledge of the leaders that were undertaking the self-assessment. And also, it led them to want to implement change. So 81% of the leaders who were involved in our pilot shared that they were likely or very likely to implement changes or new strategies based on their self-evaluation reflections. So we can see that this is a high impact strategy, a high impact tool. And really interestingly, most of those who were involved with our pilot said that it took them between 20 to 40 minutes to go through that entire process. So we're hopeful to be able to get you started on that process a little bit later on. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ben, who's going to talk you through and show you in live format what the tool looks like.
Thanks, Dennis. And as he mentioned earlier, I'm the Senior Change Manager here at YEF. So I'm probably just going to spend 10 to 15 minutes tops introducing you to the Epic self-assessment tool. There's no functionality to unmute yourself on Teams at the moment. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat and we can pick them up at the end of my section before we pass back to Dennis. So I'm just going to share my screen and introduce you to the tool. Where can you find Epic might be the first question that you're asking. There is a link that we'll put in the chat at the end of my presentation. The self-assessment tool will also be available very shortly on the education sector website that we have on the YEF webpage. And as Dennis mentioned, it's designed to be very functional, very quick. So I won't spend a huge amount of time showing you the registration process. There are just a couple of questions to fill in. There is a need for you to put in a unique reference number for your education setting. So that's the only thing to flag. Once you have registered, you will be led to the dashboard. The only thing that I really wanted to introduce you to is the recommendations poster that we have here. There is the option to preview the questions, but we really do recommend that you do look through the education guidance 5 key recommendations, as they really kind of make up the spine of the self-assessment. There are 5 sections to the self-assessment tool, and they are the 5 key recommendations. So I would just recommend spending a minute or two reading through it, thinking about the points before moving on to the self-assessment tool. As Dennis mentioned, it's been designed to be completed probably on average between 25 to 30 minutes. We generally, through our user testing, we did hear that senior leaders were completing it on their own. There is also the option to complete it with the senior leadership team. That can be a really useful exercise to start generating discussion around evidence-informed practice. But I will concede that I can't imagine you'd get it done in 25 to 30 minutes if you do end up having discussion around it. There are 37 questions in total. I have already kind of prepared the questions here and completed them for the purposes of time. But you will see here that generally you will be asked to score yourself. Never, rarely, sometimes, often, always, or unsure, across a range of different questions on the practice in your education setting. And that's across the 5 key recommendations. So for the purposes of time, I'm not going to fill in the tool in front of you, but I will show you just what it looks like as you near the point of completion. And the only difference is for recommendation 5, where we look at cautiously considering unproven strategies and harmful approaches. There is just a difference there where you are simply answering yes and no. So if I put myself in the shoes of an education leader, having just completed the 37 questions, I will reach the end of the tool. I did just want to show you one page and probably just explain this to you because I do think it's quite important. The tool as it stands is completed anonymously. So that means as an education setting, you're not giving us your answers connected to your education setting. They remain anonymous, which was done purposefully. We understand that some settings may want to keep their questions private, but what that does mean is that we don't necessarily have the permission or the possibility to contact you with offers of personalized support in areas where we can see that you may have scored slightly lower. If you did wish to provide us with the information from your education setting, you would just need to, on this page, press yes, please, or no, thank you. But I do just want to stress that either way, if you don't wish to share your responses with us, you will still receive your free insights report and you will still be able to benchmark your practice against other settings. So that's just an important point to raise. Similarly, if you would like to share your results with other settings, perhaps in your trust, in your group, or your local authority, there is the option to do so here, and you would just need to input the name of the trust, group, or local authority. And lastly, I won't touch on this very long, but there is a question here around whether or not you're completing this as part of the Catalyst program. I would imagine for the majority of the organisations on the call, that won't be relevant. But just to explain, the Catalyst program is a pilot implementation program that we are funding this year at YEF, working with a kind of consortium of education providers. But as I mentioned, for the majority of you, that won't be relevant. So having completed that, we kind of come to the jewel in the crown of the EPIC self-assessment tool. And we reach your dashboard where you can access your insights report. The insights report essentially gives you customized feedback based on the responses that you gave to the questions. And it provides you with a rating of how your practice aligns with the YEF practice guidance. Aside from that, it kind of provides you with further guidance on what you can keep doing to improve across the 5 key areas. And it does provide linked references to the YEF practice guidance report, which will kind of give you more details on what you could be doing. It provides you with case studies. So I will briefly show you what that looks like. So for recommendation 1, I can see here that I scored a 58% alignment with the YEF practice guidance. You will see that there are down here on the bottom left, there is a key reference to the section in the report where you can find out more information on specific guidance around recommendation 1, which is keeping children in education. And this is the case for all 5 key recommendations. You will receive customized feedback based on how you scored across each of these areas. The intention for this is, of course, for you to read it and to reflect on what your practice looks like. But we do want you to download the report. We really do want you to share it with colleagues. We really hope that it will prompt discussion within your senior leadership team. And then, that discussion might lead to tangible changes, perhaps in your practice across your education setting. Aside from the insights report, which I just showed you there, there is also a comparison feature, which allows you to compare yourself with a range of different education settings across the country. So on this page, you'll see how you compare to the national average. And there's a range of different metrics that you can kind of look at. So, for example, in this example, I was a school in the London region. So I'm able to compare myself against other education settings in the London region. One thing to flag is just that this is a live data set. So your comparison will always be against all of the other education settings that have completed the tool. At the moment, as the tool launched in early July, we don't necessarily have a big data set. So the comparisons might not be very rich in data, but we do feel confident that by the point of autumn, winter term, we will start to have quite a robust data set. And you will be able to kind of pull out some interesting comparisons. Uh, and so we really do hope that the self-assessment tool will be completed on an annual basis. We really hope that by doing so, you as an organization, as an education setting, will be able to track how the changes you're making have impacted on your settings alignment to the evidence in violence prevention. But similarly for us as an organisation at YEF, we will also start to really get a robust picture of the areas where education settings might need more help across the nation, which will allow us to inform programs, implementation tools, resources that we can start to put out to help bridge that gap between the evidence and what's happening in practice. We really hope that if you do find this tool helpful and useful, that you are able to share it with your networks. I think I'm aware that there's a wide range of different people on the call, but I think generally across the piece, we do see you as change makers, and we really do feel that you can really help us to spread the word of the tool and its usefulness. So we do really hope that if you move on to completing the tool and you find it helpful, you are able to share it. That's a very, very short whistle-stop tour of the tool. I'm very conscious that it's much easier for you to complete it to get a more robust understanding. But if there are any questions, if there are any comments, please do ask them in the chat right now before I pass you back to Dennis.
Thanks, Ben. And just as you hover your mouse over that, yeah, great to see that in real time. If you have got questions, please drop them into the chat now. And just as you're all doing that, Ben, if you could just pull up the dashboard and that main screen that users will see after completing the self-assessment, that would be great.
Uh, the latest results, I'm assuming.
Thanks. Just as the questions come through, as you can see, there's this dashboard that gives a breakdown of each recommendation, and as a education leader, it's really clear to say, great, okay, we're doing okay with recommendations 1 through 3. Maybe we should zoom in on 4 and 5 and focus in there. So there's a range of data that's provided, and as Ben said, that report is really helpful, particularly with sharing with colleagues, but also with governors, with trustees, and with other interested parties. I think it really helps to improve the robustness with which we're trying to tackle the issues that we're experiencing in our contexts. So yeah, I'm going to turn over to the questions. Thanks for sharing that dashboard, Ben. There's a question from Natalie. Is there a way for local authorities to get an overview of education settings that have completed the self-assessment? This can be anonymous, just help to identify gaps that LA VRUs can support with at scale. That's a fantastic question. And we see that local authorities and VRUs are kind of really well placed to both raise the awareness of this tool, but also maybe to support the education sectors with what did they do off the back of it. The process for that would be to gather from education settings in the area, just permission to say, yeah, we're keen for you to be able to know about who's completed it, and for us to be able to then be able to share that with yourselves, like a local authority or a violence reduction unit. And the screen that Ben shared at the end of the questions, where people can just tick to share it with their local authority, would be the best way for them to identify that they're happy for that information to be shared. In terms of anonymous responses, yeah, we could probably give you a bit of an indication to say, there's 5 settings in your area that have already completed it. But that may or may not be helpful in terms of you knowing who those settings are. But it's definitely something that we'll be open to. Ultimately, we want this resource to be in the hands of as many leaders as possible, and then for them to be able to work together collaboratively on how to move practice forward off the back of it. Thanks for your question. Um, Marie, your question is, how have you considered trauma-informed practice within this assessment? This feels like a missed opportunity for weaving in some excellent work in this area that complements violence prevention. I think your point around complements is a really, really great word to use it as to describe it. Trauma-informed approaches kind of feature in 2 ways in our practice guidance. First of all, they are in recommendation 5, where it talks about some of the areas where we don't have a robust evidence base to recommend it as the thing to do to prevent violence. So I know that when I was leading an alternative provision, I would deliver trauma-informed training to support my staff to be able to build great relationships with young people, to avoid re-traumatization, and to support those relationships and that relational practice. However, at the Youth Endowment Fund, we specifically focus on what does the evidence say about the things that will reduce violence. So at the moment, there has not been kind of proven studies to show that training teachers or training adults on trauma-informed practice will result in a reduction in violent crime committed by young people. So it's not to say that there aren't other reasons that you might want to employ that strategy. And the classic example is with recommendation 2 about trusted adult relationships. And it's often the case that settings will roll out some form of trauma awareness training to support their practitioners to be able to build great relationships. And we know from the evidence that having great relationships, having role models, and having trusted adults is a preventative factor to reducing the likelihood of young people becoming involved in violence. In our education practice guidance in the report, there's much more detail about trauma-informed training and what we say about it. So I definitely encourage you to take a look there. And yeah, if you've got any more questions off the back of having looked at that, please, yeah, do get in touch with us. Natasha, really interesting talk, thank you. Has there been any consideration to interventions in relation to the digital space, risks around AI use, social media, how they fit within your recommendations? So we have a toolkit, which you may be familiar with the EEF's toolkit. We have a very similar approach, where there are a range of interventions with all of the evidence compiled based on each of those interventions and those approaches. That toolkit shows how high impact or low impact or no impact those interventions are, how much they cost, and how rich and how good quality the evidence is that supports our assessment of those approaches. Increasingly, of course, we're thinking about technological based interventions. The use of virtual reality headsets and those sorts of approaches, as well as hearing really closely from the sector about the impact of social media as well. And we're continually adding to that toolkit. So we definitely don't have a robust kind of blow by blow on the impacts of AI as that continues to develop and emerge. But we will be updating our toolkit, particularly with those things that we're hearing from the sector that sector leaders want to know more about. I'm also aware of some work that's taking place within DfE and Home Office around thinking about those sort of technological challenges that are impacting young people as well. So we're probably likely to hear more about that soon. Great. Thanks for those questions. If you have still got any more questions, please pop them in the chat. And that's what we're here for, to be able to answer those questions for you. So I guess at this point we kind of want to have 2 main themes. One of which is to say, if you're on this call and you are an education leader, you're responsible for a setting, whether that be a school, a college, or an alternative provision, we really want to encourage you as your next step to go on and complete your self-assessment using Epic. Um, we also know that on the call there are some people who don't lead a setting and are in other roles. So we really want to encourage your next step after this to be to think about how you might share this tool and these resources with settings that you work with, that you interact with, that are in your area. So we're actually going to give the gift of time now, because often we know that you can attend a webinar, you can get given lots of great information, but then you're off to the next thing, and often we don't have time to pick those threads back up. So yeah, if you are an education setting, please register for the tool. If you just need your unique reference number, and then use some of this time to complete your self-assessment, and then take a look at that dashboard and download your insights report. And then really importantly, share with colleagues and plan when you're going to revisit this. I know it's towards the end of the academic year, so how can this be picked back up in a leadership team meeting or with governors, for example, in the near future? If you're not an education leader and you're thinking about this, please do feel free to share these resources with those that are in your spheres. And we are going to stay on the call. So if you've got more questions, please feel free to stick around and ask those to us. But for now, thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to seeing more registrations come through on the Epic self-assessment tool. And yeah, if you do have any questions, we've included our email addresses there, but also we'll stick around on the call in case there are anything else that you might want to ask us. Thanks so much for joining us. Just in your question, Sarah. So if you are a leader of an education setting, you would often have that URN that you would refer to usually on sort of DFE paperwork. It is available by going to the Get Information About Schools website. So if you just search into Google Get Information About Schools, you can search for the education setting. I didn't see in the introduction where you were based. So yeah, let me know. Thanks, Ben's popped the link in the chat. But do let me know where you are based, and what organisation you're from. We can help you with that. Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that information with us. So yeah, it should be available if it's DFE a DFE registered setting. It should be available on the link that Ben shared with you there. But yeah, if you do have any issues with that or any problems, then just get in touch with us and we can see what we can do to support. Great stuff. Thanks for joining us. Helen, I can spot that you're still on the call. Was there something you wanted to chat with us? We'll just hang around for a few more moments just in case you had any questions. just going to assume that you're just, yeah, still in the call accidentally. But if you, yeah, you have got anything that you want to ask us, just ping us an email and then we'll help you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.